touch interactions. That's what we're going to do today. So we're going to build like a mobile scene in Unity, a vertical mobile scene, and we will do different touch interactions such as swiping left and right and moving our camera around and making it look like we've got we're going to have actually a big background to move our camera around and do presses and swipes and things like that. All right, so I don't even know if that description made any sense, but let's just get going. It'll make sense once we get going on here. So we're going to create a new project, 2D. I will call it touch interactions, and turn that off. And here we go. All right, I'll be using like normal glitch the game assets, so you can find those all over the place. They're in the public domain, and they have a lot of great things going on, and so that's pretty awesome. All right, so here's our camera, like normal, this kind of rectangle view here. If you click on your game tab, you can change this free aspect ratio to, let's see, how did I do this? Aspect ratio, and for our phone, we want to do a 9:16, 9 width, and 16 high. Okay, there we go. So now we've got this nice vertical going there. And in our scene, our camera has changed to vertical as well. And so this is what our camera will see, and this is our big scene here. So first thing I'll do is get on our camera and change this thing all to white, because I hate that blue, and now that looks much better. All right, let's build. What we're going to do is we're going to build like some background stuff so that we can slide this viewpoint to the left and to the right. So we'll have some stuff on the screen, and then if we swipe to the left, we'll have some stuff over here, and over to the right, we'll have some stuff over there. Okay, so we're going to be moving back and forth. Somebody was at my door, so I had to leave. But anyways, that's the idea, is we're going to build a whole scene here and then move what the camera sees left and right based on how somebody is swiping. All right, so I'm just going to grab some glitch assets here and start to build, I don't know, some background stuff just so we can, start to see different things in here. This part will probably be kind of boring, so if you want to fast forward, go ahead. We'll just put different types of clouds and stuff in our sky. Flip it around. Actually, we'll move this one over here. Like that. And another cloud here. Scale it back. And all I'm doing is just building a scene so that we can move around in it. I think these are, I don't even think these are clouds. I think these are pieces of snow, but that's right, we'll use them as clouds. They kind of look like clouds. All right, let's see, some other background stuff. What do we got? Some rocks we can start to pile up. Oops, I'm gonna do like, oh, that looks bad. Little platform there. Actually, it really doesn't matter. So I don't need to make this beautiful because we're not doing beautiful things in this one. Let me just put some plants on there. All we're trying to do is make it look like we're moving back and forth. Some of this stuff. And let's see what else we got. Ooh, how about a campfire? That looks nice. Actually, let's move this thing back. Can I make that a -1? That way all these things, so I just changed the order and layer of this big background thing. That way all these things will stand out on front of it. And let's copy these things. Move them over. All right, that looks good enough. Okay, there we go. So when we run our game, we've got this campfire and this ice cloud up at the top. But if we look at our scene view, we've actually got all of these other things over here that we could see if we could determine how to swipe. And so I'm going to put a game object on here. I'm going to create an empty game object, and we'll call it touch interaction, or how about just touch controller. And I'm going to create a script, C# script, and we will call it touch controller. I'll select my touch controller and drag my script over to it. And so now anything we put into this code here will be on this touch controller. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to watch for swipes. And the way we do that is we watch for essentially a touch down and then a release, so a press and a release. And we look at the coordinates of where that took place. And then based on if they got bigger or smaller, we can tell if the person was swiping left or right. If we're only looking at the X's, and if we were looking at the Y's, we could tell if the person was swiping up or down. And then based on what we decide, then we will move the camera accordingly. So that is how we're going to do that. And where am I at here? So yeah, anyways, so we'll get going with that. I will double click on our touch controller and bring it up so we can start to edit it. And we will be off and running. Okay, so a couple of variables that we're going to need. We're going to need a value to watch where we are pressing. So I will call that mouse start, and we're going to call that will be a float. And again, in this case, we're only looking for touches that are moving in the X direction. So we're not really looking for somebody swiping at an angle or anything like that. We're trying to keep it really simple. So this mouse start is going to, actually I can just call it touch start. Mouse start's a bad name, touch. So this is going to be where the person's, the X value of where the person presses down on the screen. And then when we release the press, then we will do a subtraction and figure out what direction they went. So that's the whole point of this one. I'll just set it to a 0, just so we can get going. All right, so now in our update, we will say something like if input.get mouse button down 0, then we will do something, mouse start, touch start, equals input.mouse position .x. Okay, so what is all this going? So even though we're talking about touches, I'm coding all this up with mouse buttons. And that's okay, because in Unity, this mouse button left click, that's what the 0 means, left click. 1 is a right click. But with a 0, you can test it on your simulator just like you're pressing on a phone. And so that's how we're going to be using this this stuff here. We're going to always, when you're looking for mouse button down 0, that way it works on both. There are touches and things like that you can use, but the problem if you use the touches, they don't work in the simulator. So we're just going to use the mouse button. That way everything will work out. Okay, so we've got all this stuff here, and now this is when we go down. So when we press down, we are going to set our start value to our mouse position .x, right? Now we'll say something like else if, yeah, we can just make it an if input dot get mouse button up 0. So this means the touch has been released. And like I said, this works for a mouse button and works for a finger press, single finger press on a phone. Then we need to know what happened. So we'll say float delta equals touch or input dot mouse position dot x. This is the location when the press was released minus touch start. Okay, that's where we left. So touch start is where we began, and then this input dot mouse position x is where we are now, where we released our press. All right, so we'll do something. So these are going to be relatively big numbers. It's not a percentage across the screen, but for right now, we'll just say something like if delta, and we'll try it out, and if it's wrong, we'll figure it out. So if delta is less than -50, we'll consider that, move the camera right. Why does it not like that? Oh, duh. This if should be inside of here. So we should only be doing this code on the release. That's why I had it outside if, but it should be in there. And we can say something like if, else, if delta is greater than 50. Add an F up here. Then we will move the camera left. All right, so this piece of code right here, this is the important stuff. This is where we're saying, okay, this is where we start our touch. This is where we release it. This is where we check and see, did we move? And this greater than or less than -50 or greater than 50, this means that we actually intended on swiping. It's not like we just did a press and release, because it's going to be fairly hard to press and release in the exact same spot. So we got to put these thresholds on it to say, was the player like actually trying to do a swipe? Otherwise, a press might be interpreted as a swipe. So so there we go. All right, now we're going to say if we need to move to the right, then we will have a camera destination. So I'm going to make a vector 3. Vector 3 camera destination. And we're going to initialize that in our start. So we'll say camera destination equals camera.main.transform.position. So we're going to gradually move this thing over because we want to kind of animate the camera going. We don't want it just to snap. When we do our swipe, we want it to slide over to the left or slide over to the right. And so this camera destination is going to say, where should the camera be? And then we're going to write a little bit of code that actually moves it there. So when we start off, though, we're going to say the camera destination is where we're at. And that way it won't try to animate anything. Okay, so down in here, we're going to say we need to update our camera destination. We need to say, where do we want to move the camera to? So camera destination equals new vector 3 camera.main. And with a capital C, we'll get the main camera. Camera.main.transform.position.x plus 6f, because we're going to move to the right. And then the camera position Y and Z are going to be unchanged. So this is what's actually going to set up our new position. We're adding 6 to the X value when we're swiping this way. And so our Y and Z, I'll just put it out here, camera.main transform.y, camera.main.transform.z. We're going to leave those alone. And all we're going to do is update our X by this. All right, and then same thing down here. It's going to just be really similar. If we got to move left, we will do this. Except this will be a negative. Now, there's all sorts of things we need to check. We don't want this guy or the user to slide our screen over infinitely in either direction, and so we should be keeping track of how far can we do this. And at some point, we should ignore a right or left movement because we're too far away. But we're not going to do any of those checks in here because all we're trying to do is just show the functionality of how does this actually work. All right, now we're going to actually do our moving down here. And our movement is really only going to check and see if the current position of our camera, which is this, of our X value, is different than this, then we need to move. That's the idea. So we're going to say this here. If vector 3 distance, we have a really cool function we can use. That'll tell us the distance between, should be vector 3. Between two different points in our scene. Oh boy, mistake. This should be position. Sorry about that. Red helps. Transform.position.y.z. There we go. Much better. All right, so now we're going to take the distance of where our camera is versus where we want it to go. Camera destination. And we'll just check and see if that is bigger than, I'm just going to make up a number here, 0.2f. So we're going to say if this distance is bigger than this really small value, because we don't want to say if they're equal, because are we ever going to get exactly equal? Probably not. There's ways to do that, but we're doing a quick thing here. So if you want it to be exactly equal, work on that a little bit. But for right now, we're just going to say if it gets close enough, we'll call it close enough. So now we're going to check and see where we're at. So we're close if, or actually in this case, we're bigger than our distance, so we still need to move. So if, and we'll say camera dot main dot position dot x is greater than camera destination dot x. We'll do something. So we're checking to see which way do we have to go. This should be transform. Man, I am having a rough time typing these things out, right? Yeah. Position. There we go. All right, so if the camera is larger than where it needs to be, then we need to move it down. And if it's not, then we need to move it over. So this thing here, we're going to update our position. And that means that we need to subtract values from this x position because it currently is larger than where we need to be. All right. So our camera dot main dot transform dot position equals new vector 3. And where are we moving it to? So we're going to move it. You know, we could just snap it, but that would be like kind of weird. So we're going to slide it. And so our new vector 3 is going to be where we are in the x minus camera speed. And we don't have a camera speed yet. Get out of here. Let's see. But we will. So that's going to be our x value. And then our y and z are going to be the same thing. Dot y and camera dot main dot transform dot position dot z. Okay, so we are going to move our x, make our x smaller because we're too big, and it's going to be reduced by camera speed, whatever that is. We'll go define that in a second. We'll make it public so we can adjust how quickly it slides back and forth. But then we'll do an else. If we need to move the other direction, just copy these two lines. And this will be a plus camera speed, right? So this is the else of here, of this if, saying that in this case we're down here saying that our camera position is less than our destination. So we need to add to it. That's what this is. All right, that should be pretty good. Let's create our camera speed variable that we don't have yet. Let's see, is there anything else down here? No. So our camera speed is going to just be, I'll just make something up here, public float camera equals 0.1f. Now that I've made this thing public, we'll be able to go adjust it up in the top, back in Unity. Okay, so I think this is all that we're going to have to do for our sliding, and let's see what happens. We've got our touch controller with our script on it and our camera speed. Let's see what happens if I click, go that way, click this way. Whoa, where'd we go? Oh man, we're freaking out here. What did we do wrong? I think I have an else. Wow, that was interesting. I thought for sure that that should have worked. So what are we bugging out for? That way doesn't work. We move left. There we go. And it's still moving. Let's look at our camera and figure out what the problem is. So we're kind of toggling back and forth. It's almost like 0.601. So let's see. What if we go to our speed here? And we could change this to 0.05. Let's run that. Still doing little micro adjustments. Okay, so how about this? Let's come in here, see how it's shaking back and forth, and we'll say if these distances are greater than that, we're going to do all these things. But then let's just do one more check. Say, have we arrived? And if we have, we'll say camera.main.transform.position equals camera.destination. Right? So we'll say if it's less than or equal to that, then we just set them equal to each other. So after we do our moving, we're going to double check and see what's happening. See what happens. It's still dancing? It still is dancing. So let's change this value. Is that going to make any difference? No. All right, well, sometimes things don't go very smoothly. Let's just say if it's less than, if it's greater, if the distance is greater than this threshold, we're going to move. So what if we say greater than 0.05? Still shaking. So something is very bizarre. Because it shouldn't be doing that. So let's troubleshoot this. I'm a little bit surprised that it's behaving that way, but just to go through the troubleshooting process, I am going to print out this distance here. This whole thing. Let's see where we're at. Sometimes you have to do this. And I will just show that I am struggling. Okay, so now our distance here is 4. And we should be right where we want to be. So our distance is still being calculated as 4, which is between our destination and where we're at, but we are actually at our location. So I am going to up this thing a lot and say, as long as it's greater than 4, then move. And it's still juggling because, or going back and forth because this thing is just barely bigger than 4. So how about 4.1? Now let's see what happens. Now we're stuck. All right, now if we move back, we'll go back. And then we go out in space, which is another thing that's interesting. Let's try this again. You know, usually I get it right the first time, but not this time. Main camera. What's interesting is our Z value over here is changing. And I think that that's probably an issue. So why is our Z value changing? Let's take a look at this and see. X X. Ah, look at this. This should be a Z. Major problems. These should all be Z's. And I'm going to move this back. Because we were all over the map moving our camera around. This is how it should be. So yes, look at that. We found a major problem. And now let's see what happens. There we go. Oh, beautiful. And here we go. Yes, we can swipe back and forth. And there's a little jump at the end, and I'm going to fix that by probably, I don't need this line of code. I was trying to put that in there before to make it look right, but who knows. There we go across. Very nice. Let's go back the other way. Very good. Let's go back the other way. Very good. Now this transition is super slow. And we can speed that up, right? So we have our touch controller. I can change our speed. Let's make it 0.2. It's not going to be really fast. There we go. Not bad. And we can adjust these speeds however we want to. But now, there we go. So now we're moving back and forth just by swiping. And we can have different things in these scenes. Remember, we're not really switching scenes. We're just moving where this camera is. We're just moving this thing. We're just moving the X value and saying, look over here. And then we swipe, we move it over here. And we swipe again, and we go over here. So that's all that we're really doing when we're moving the camera around. So that is the swiping gesture that I wanted to show you. And I got way off track because this I had typed in as X, and I didn't realize it. But that's all right. Sometimes you make mistakes, and you got to try and figure out what's going on. And I'm going to leave that in. I could edit it out, but you know, I think it's important sometimes to see when things don't go smoothly, what you do to troubleshoot it. And this debug is my friend. So anyways, that is our swiping tutorial. And we also showed how to get this vertical representation here by changing the aspect ratio to 9:16, and that worked out pretty good. I think there are some different versions of Unity. Maybe I need just like a slightly newer one, but I know at some point there was, I clicked on here and it said like iPhone 5, iPhone 6 Plus or whatever. It had like actual names of things in here, but I just set it to 9:16 for now. So I'm not sure. Maybe if you go to build settings and build for iOS, let's see what happens. Maybe that's where that is. If I set to build for iOS, okay. I don't know how I got that. Oh, I don't have oh, that's the problem. So on this particular setup here, I don't have the iOS module installed. But on my other machine where I do, when I went over to this drop down here, it had like, iOS 5, iOS 5S, all the different aspect ratios for the different devices. But if you don't have that, you can just hit the plus sign like I did and add a 9:16. But if you do have the devices you're looking at, you can just select them in that. And again, that's in the game tab to select your vertical. All right, so yeah, we did vertical camera, and we did swiping left and swiping right to move it. And we also made a lot of mistakes, but we also fixed them.